I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods. Yeah, one in particular, I'm just a messenger. Let me just pass on the rock. Browning, brunning, pruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you, you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box. And you cannot compare them at all, so don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire. I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table. Yeah. Fantasy round table, come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table. Woo. Fantasy round table, come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable Podcast. It's Tuesday and we're already off to a better start than Friday because I remembered to add us back to the show. So you get to hear this opening. I don't have to do it twice. Dennis, has the start to your week gone pretty well?
Hey, I got to be honest. It's been fun-filled and busy. We got the plumbing moved today, all the gravel back in the hole, the cement over, so we've got electrical and plumbing coming up out of the middle of the floor again. Tomorrow we will take up all the flooring and get that ready. Thursday, Friday, we're getting it painted. Cabinets are getting delivered on Friday. My son has a concert tonight at Ohio State. It's the OSU Jazz Festival, so he's playing about 9 o'clock, so when we're done with the show, I'm heading up to Ohio State. My youngest is getting on a Zoom, so if my internet gets sketchy, it's about the next year's 8th grade pilgrimage to Washington, D.C. that all schools do. And, I forgot my hat. Scott Fish has started making announcements. So my shirt from my Scott Fish Bowl Live.
I know, it should be pretty.
Unfortunately, I can't do the Cincinnati Live again this year, because Caleb's not his school band, but his actual band is playing a festival in upstate Pennsylvania, and I'll be there working the merch booth and managing the band and trying to, glad hand people. But I thought I would bust out my, my Graders Scott Fishbowl hat, my SFB 13 shirt from the live where we were at the brewery in Cincinnati. It's not too late. If you haven't applied yet, go apply, get that application in there. It'll be thousands of people playing, raising money for charity. It's always a good time.
Well, we have a pretty packed show. We're going to look at the class of 2023 QBs, some good, some not so good. Dennis and I did finish a 2-round NFL.
Just the first two.
Yeah. Dennis and I did finish a 2-round NFL mock draft that we feel okay about.
Fair, we have finished it 3 times.
Look, all that was practice. But we're going to jump into some news and notes because Justin Fields is no longer on the Bears. Kind of clarifies the number 1 overall pick. The Bears traded Justin Fields to the Steelers for a conditional 6th round pick. Could be a 4th, depending on playing time. They have a big decision to make May 2nd if they want to pick up the 5th-year option. Personally, I think they're likely to decline that because given how this offseason went, I doubt that Justin Fields is going to command $22 million a year in any kind of re-signing contract. They came out almost right away and said Russell Wilson's still the starter, and some reports that they are waiting to sign him to a long-term contract as soon as the season ends. They just didn't want to have to pay him more this year since Denver's on the hook. Tell me, what is Pittsburgh doing?
So Mike Tomlin, it feels like he's got a couple reclamation projects going on. He knows that he just is too good a coach to put his team in position to draft one of the elite quarterbacks. And so he's playing the odds. If I can't have one of the elites, I'm going to take a shot on a couple others and just see what happens. I'm conflicted about whether or not they will or should pick up Fields' option because Russ is 34 years old, 35 years old. 33, but he plays like he's 39. he's lost the mobility, which was really what helped him to be able to.
I'm going to say he has not lost the mobility. I watched all those games last year when he wanted to take off. That was actually some of what helped Denver on that winning streak. He would just take off and run. So I do not
There's a
concur with
difference, I
that.
guess, between mobile taking off and running, and mobile putting yourself in a position to make throws. And maybe that was just Denver didn't have things, but I
All
felt
of
like
his best throws were from rolling out too. I think you have to separate him a little bit from the S show that he got in terms of coaching staffs and schemes there.
maybe. But with Fields, you've got a young guy that has a certain skill set. And if somebody can develop it and play to what his strengths are, I'm not saying bring in Greg Roman and Lamar Jackson, but maybe. I mean, you have to look at what Baltimore did with Jackson's skill set and how they made him successful. And Fields is a bigger, stronger, version of that. And the potential is there. Don't put Fields in positions where he's having to read 4, 5, 6 different things before making the decision. Be comfortable with him running for 800 plus yards a year and having a lower volume passing offense. It all comes down to, will they have the cap space next year? At what point can they just sign him to an extension? Do you know?
I mean, you can just sign him to extension. You don't have to do the 5th-year option. We saw that with Burrow. We saw that, I believe, with Justin Herbert as well. You don't have to do that. And honestly, here's what I'm going to say. We saw with Sam Darnold in a similar situation, had some moments with the Jets, and people forget that. In his first season, I thought he had some good moments, but then some weird things happen. You had the seeing ghosts, you had the fallout with coaches. Gets dealt to Carolina. They immediately picked up that 5th-year option saying, hey, we've got Sam Darnold for 2 years. And they immediately regretted it probably come October of that first season. I don't see any need for Pittsburgh. Right now, they have 2 quarterbacks that they know they would have for 1 year. And if they like what they have, they can work on that. And like I said, I do not think Justin Fields is commanding $22 million in his next contract unless something magical happens. He also, to me, is not the kind of quarterback that would thrive with Arthur Smith. Russell Wilson is a lot closer to what Ryan Tannehill was in Tennessee, and that was probably the best version of Arthur Smith's offense we've seen. But if they don't like either of these guys, they can completely start clean in 25. Another reason I probably wouldn't do it is there's been some back and forth about Tomlin and whether it's time to make a change there. I might just leave myself, if I was in the front office, some options.
Maybe, but I think it's going to be hard to move on from a coach that's never had a losing season. And in Darnold's defense, when Carolina got him, they still had Matt Rule.
I know, but I'm saying there have been a few times where that has just not panned out, and I don't see any reason, especially given the kind of franchise that Pittsburgh is, where they're going to want to commit to that right now.
Yeah, I feel like if they can sign Fields to a 2-year extension, and for $12 million or something, $10 million, something that invests enough that says we're going to keep you around because we want to develop you and see what we got.
Because this was the same thing the Packers had with Jordan Love.
Yeah.
They did, but they had kind of put themselves in a position, and they had seen him for 3 years, so they at least had an idea of what they had on their roster. But they didn't just pick up his 5th-year option; they did something different. I honestly would just let it ride because
no glory.
Well, and I don't think you're in a situation where it's going to end up costing you a lot. A couple other quarterback moves. The Browns added Tyler Huntley which the only thing I can think is this is bad news for Dorian Thompson-Robinson, because I doubt Browns are going to keep 4 quarterbacks, and they have Jameis Winston already. 49ers added Josh Dobbs, probably just kind of a quality backup there, joins Brandon Allen behind Brock Purdy. Either of those moves do a lot for you?
So the Dobbs move does, because if something happens to Purdy, Dobbs takes over as the starter. And we've seen him have flashes with average teams. And we've seen him struggle, even having Justin Jefferson, we've seen him struggle. So there's no guarantee, he could step in for Purdy and execute the offense for a long stretch at a super high level. That being said, Cleveland, we saw what they did last year with Dobbs. And, they've been without early picks for a couple of years thanks to the Deshaun Watson deal. So they bring in Winston, they bring in Huntley. I think they keep DTR as a practice squad quarterback, a developmental quarterback. But potentially, if Winston or Huntley flashes a little bit, I think teams have to have 3 quarterbacks now. We've been down the road when teams have.
I just more meant it feels like, and we'll talk about him with the 23 rookies. It feels like a bad sign for DTR, who started last season, week 1, being, hey, we're confident he's our number 2, and everything during the season and everything so far this offseason suggests that will never be the case again.
Well, they pushed him off the end of the dock. He clearly wasn't ready to swim.
Yeah, clearly. Dak Prescott reworked his deal to give cap relief to the Cowboys. Somehow only managed to give them $4 million. They do not have much money. They were able to re-sign Rico Dowdle, but how important is this draft going to be for Dallas?
I think it's going to be huge. They've got to replace Tyron Smith. Dowdle right now is their number 1 back. He has a pretty good athletic profile. He's been working his way up the depth chart since he got there. I don't know if he's more than a Jag, but he could get 40 or 50% of the touches this year, especially if they go with a rookie like some, it's easy to kind of say, oh, Jerry's going to go.
Supposedly they're talking to Zeke about coming back, and part of me wonders if that's why Dak gave money back, because I know they were super tight.
They're tight, but it's, the Cowboys don't have a ton of space, and they're going to need cheap players. And as much as I love Zeke,
well, he'd be a cheap player now. I mean,
lost a step.
Yeah, he'd still be better than anything that they've currently got. Speaking of running backs that give us pause, Alexander Mattison signs with the Raiders. I have to be honest, there were people that were really pumped about this. I still think this is a great sign for Zamir White, who was RB9 the last 4 weeks of the season. Alexander Mattison was fading down toward the end of the season. I see him as a decent depth signing, but I still think White ends up being the lead. Do you feel different?
Yeah, I think we know what Mattison is. Mattison is a backup that pops off a week late for fantasy, and he just is going to be a depth guy. I can see the early down work being split 60-40 with him and Zamir White, and then Amir Abdullah sprinkling in on pass catching. So it's not somebody I'm chasing for fantasy.
On to receivers, and this one has some fantasy implications. Mike Williams signing a 1-year deal with the Jets. It's kind of feels like a little bit of a prove it deal. The Jets kind of have to be pushing their chips in a little bit on 2024. Some people were saying this gives them pause about Garrett Wilson. It doesn't for me. I still have Garrett Wilson way up there. First of all, Mike Williams is going to have to prove he can stay on the field for any length of time. I still don't think this precludes the Jets from taking receivers in the draft. How do you feel about Williams?
I think Mike Williams is going to have a great 5-game stretch for the Jets. They're not likely to all be back to back to back to back to back. Williams is he's a big-bodied receiver that does some things really well, but he does struggle staying healthy. I like him in the role he's going to play. Garrett Wilson's going to have 150 targets.
Yeah. I mean, this does not stop me from Garrett Wilson. It makes me feel better about when we get to our mock draft who I picked to the Jets, but we shall see. The Jets have also done some yeoman-like work in the offseason so far, rebuilding that offensive line. They brought in a few people, including Tyron Smith, which is good news for those of us rostering Breece Hall as well. This one probably, got a chuckle from me. I don't know how it hit you, but the Browns, without seeing him play it down, have given Jerry Jeudy a 3-year, $58 million extension.
Did they not see him play it down? I mean, come on.
For them.
What did they think? Oh, we can fix him? I don't know.
It feels like bad news for Elijah Moore, though.
It does. Just, I mean, you got to follow the money.
Maybe
Amari
bad news for Amari Cooper.
He's got his. He's the veteran. I think he's there through the end of his contract, and probably it wouldn't surprise me if they're like, if you want to stick around, we've got a price. Let's agree on something. It doesn't bode well for Elijah Moore. It moves it. He's going to be behind Njoku, Cooper, and now seemingly Jerry Jeudy. I'm going to need to look into the details a little closer of the contract. Where's the out at and what's the dead cap? We've seen a lot. It's like the Josh Jacobs contract, 4 years, 48 million or 50 million, something, whatever it was, when really it's like a 2-year contract or a 1-year contract based on the way
Yeah, and it doesn't look like Spot Track has the details yet.
Oh, it's only been 2 hours. What do you mean, Spot Track?
I thought they negotiated all the contracts. A couple of other additions. Let's see if any of these hit you. The Patriots finally get their man at wide receiver. They signed KJ Osborne. Lions re-signed Donovan Peoples-Jones. And the Cardinals added Chris Moore, who I don't know if you looked at our NFL depth chart site recently, but they're currently projecting as a starter for the Arizona Cardinals.
Those guys are players in the NFL.
But not players I probably have on my fantasy roster. I had some hopes going into last season for DPJ, but I feel like he's still a little buried. They haven't brought back Josh Reynolds, but with Amon-Ra, Laporta, Gibbs catching balls out of the backfield, and hopefully an emergence of Jamison Williams, plus Khalif Raymond, I find it hard to believe DPJ is.
I feel like they're gonna. I'm not big on Khalif Raymond as one of my top 3. I feel like they're going to bring in somebody, a rookie, get somebody, Keon Coleman would be great there.
Well, let's move on and look at the quarterbacks from last year before we dive into this new mock draft. It was a better class probably than we've had, in the 2 classes previous to them, as that has borne out this offseason. We'll see if that continues to stay true, but we'll start doing in order. The number 1 overall pick was Bryce Young. Started 16 games for Carolina, went 2-14, 59.8% completion percentage, 2,877 passing yards, 11 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, was sacked 62 times. Wasn't a huge factor on the ground, 253 yards, no touchdowns, did fumble 11 times, which gives him 21 total turnovers. Not a great first year. If you were just going off that, this would probably not be good, but they have given some signs of hope. We liked the Dave Canales hire for potentially helping to rebuild him. They have tried to go out and get some offensive line pieces, and they went and actually got him a number 1 receiver in Deontay Johnson. So it wasn't a great start, but I still have him in QB2 range, and I still have hope. Do you?
I'm very optimistic based on the moves that they made. They added A'Shawn Robinson and DJ Wanham, Josie Jewell, Jordan Fuller, and Dane Jackson to the defense. So if the defense plays better, gives the offense a few more opportunities. They got Adam Thielen returning in the slot, Mingo going into his second year, and then you add Deontay Johnson to be – I love Adam Thielen, but Johnson's going to be the leader of that wide receiver core. They need a tight end. You're not going to get it done with Tommy Trumbull and Ian Thomas. So they're going to have to do something. Maybe if they grab a Jatavion Sanders at the top of the second round, or maybe they risk it and go for him, hope he falls to the third. Cade Stover in the third or fourth round.
Maybe Theo Johnson.
Yeah, Theo Johnson. So they've got some options. They're going to need to do something at the tight end position to provide a more viable passing down threat. But I like what they did. They went out and got 2 big old guards, and to help boost that offensive line, they got a swing tackle and Josh Nyman. Do they have work to do? Yes. But I think they're trying to do everything they can to put players around Bryce Young and make him successful. And I still like Andy Dalton a lot as a mentor and a guy that can kind of help him approach the game and make sure that they're seeing things the same. So I feel like he's in a position, he could be a sneaky buy in Dynasty right now.
Next up, didn't have to wait long. Number 2 overall pick was C.J. Stroud, went to the Houston Texans. All he did was win Offensive Rookie of the Year and carry his team to the second round of the playoffs. Started 15 games, went 9-6. 63.9% completion percentage, 41.08 in yardage, 23 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, only 38 sacks. I loved what I saw. I love this young Texans offense. I like that they went and got him a good running back in Joe Mixon. I have him top 12 in my QB Dynasty rankings. How about you?
So I was taking a look around the different sites, and Dynasty Nerds has him at 3 or 4 or 5, somewhere in there. Fantasy Pros has him like 5 or 6. Dynasty Trade Calculator has him like 7 or 8. So he's widely viewed as top 8, top 9. And I don't know how you can really argue with it. He put it. Could it have been a fluke year? Sure, it could have been. But he's going to get Tank Dell back. Nico Collins had a breakout. They brought back Noah Brown. Xavier Hutchinson, John Mechie started to come on a little bit. You've got Robert Woods there as kind of the glue veteran locker room guy to keep these guys going. They brought back Dalton Schultz. They drafted Juice Scruggs at center last year, who got injured and missed most of the year. That I think it took them till about week 8 or 9 before their projected starting 5 actually played together in a regular season game. They've got some good players in Tunsil and Titus Howard. I think they're going to need to start to fortify that line. You got some guys getting older, but adding Joe Mixon, who fits that offense to a T, there's no reason this offense should sputter this year.
Next up, we have Anthony Richardson, and he unfortunately was limited to 4 games, only think 2 full games, and I think he had 2 partial games. Went 2-2, 59.5% completion percentage, 577 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. Did run for 136 yards and 4 more touchdowns. The potential and the athleticism, as we saw when he was able to stay on there, is off the charts. Can he stay healthy? Can he develop as a passer? Those were questions we had going into his rookie year that I don't think we got enough answers to. I have him as a high-end QB2 right now in Dynasty just because I think there are still some questions. I have him in that, 12 to 15 range. How about you?
Yeah, I love what he brings to the table, but we got to see him on the field, stay healthy. He's got excellent weapons in Jonathan Taylor, Michael Pittman, Josh Downs. Alec Pierce provides a deep threat. They just have to keep him healthy and make sure he doesn't, try to do things too much outside of structure. Let him run because he's big. He's 6'5", 240. You want to let him get on the move because of his athleticism, but you want to minimize the hits he takes. I drafted him. I had no less than 2 instances last year where I had rebuilding teams with the 101 and I traded back to the 102 because I couldn't justify not taking Bijan Robinson, but I did not need a running back. I needed a quarterback to get my rebuild going. and I drafted him twice in those scenarios. I still need him to get going.
Yeah, I feel like I took a smattering of these top three guys in different leagues, in different Superflex leagues last year. And, I still think there's potential that all three could end up being decent, viable starters. The fourth member of the band who had to wait till the second round to get drafted was Will Levis. He ended up appearing and starting 9 games, went 3-6 as a starter, only 58.4% completion percentage, 1808 on the yardage, 8 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, sacked 28 times. They have, to their credit, built around him. They just signed Calvin Ridley. They signed Tony Pollard to compete with Tyjae Spears in the backfield, giving them a little bit more flexible dynamic. They brought in Brian Callahan, who is a more offensive-minded head coach. Those are all good things. I'm still not totally sold on Levis. Low-end QB2 for me right now. I need to see it happen.
So with Levis and Brian Callahan, it's like what – I think you almost have to look at this Tennessee offense as what would it look like with 17 games of Jake Browning? Because Callahan comes from that Cincinnati offense. Calvin Ridley's no Jamar Chase. DeAndre Hopkins might have been T. Higgins at one point in his career. He's still good, but he's not the difference maker he used to be. Treylon Burks, it's wild to say, but he's no Tyler Boyd, not yet anyways. So they've got some work to do. I like the pairing of Spears and Pollard. Spears is a very explosive back. They brought in Lloyd Cushenberry. He was in Denver. What are your thoughts on him as a center?
He was a great center, and he graded out as the top free agent center of this year. That was I thought he did a great job for them.
Yeah, so adding Skoronski last year, I do think they need to probably add an offensive lineman in the draft to beef it up.
I mean, they could be in position to snag Joe Alt because they're pick 7, and
I don't think that's a draft that they haven't a mock draft that they haven't taken Joe Alt. To be fair,
I mean, including our own.
Yeah, but I like Levis. He came out hot, but he's got development to do. He needs to get some work in.
Next up, taken in the third round was Hendon Hooker, went to the Detroit Lions, was coming off of a knee injury, basically redshirted pretty much his rookie year. Some people thought maybe the quarterback of the future. I think we still don't know. Teddy Bridgewater retired, so Hooker might be the only other quarterback behind Goff now. But
go ahead.
How do you feel about the future? To me, he's still kind of an unknown.
Yeah, he is the only other guy on the roster at that position. I liked him a lot coming out of college, but he had to recover from the knee injury. He was older. He was a 25-year-old prospect. So there's always some concern when you're drafting an older quarterback prospect. It's like, well, he's been watching defenses in college for 6 years. Of course, he should be better than these freshmen and sophomore defenders he's going against. I think he's in a position to be the successor to Jared Goff. Back him up for at least one more year. See what happens. If they decide they're done paying Goff when Hooker's going into his 4th year. Look, we've seen it work with Jordan Love. We've seen the Packers do it. And if Detroit's like, you know what, we're going to set this guy behind Jared Goff for 3 or 4 years. Maybe they extend him and let Goff's contract run out, and then Hooker takes over. Hooker was productive in college. He had Cedric Tillman and Jalen Hyatt, who both were high draft picks. I like him. I just don't, we just haven't had a chance to see anything.
Same is true. The next guy, 4th round, the Rams took Stetson Bennett. He did not play at all last year. I liked the landing spot originally. I thought there was potential. It doesn't seem like the Rams are planning on him coming back at this point in time. I don't think he should be rostered. Do you think he'll ever play an NFL snap?
I don't know. Our lad still lists him as the backup to Stafford, but it feels like they're going to draft Michael Pratt or somebody like that to be
Well,
the.
they also signed Jimmy G.
Oh, that's right. They don't
So-
have that updated yet.
Which I think is interesting because they had Carson Wentz, and I didn't think he did that. I thought he looked okay, and he's, as far as I can tell, still unsigned, and they went and got Jimmy G.
Maybe Wentz still thinks he can get a shot as a starter somewhere. I mean, it seems out of the question now. Look out, Denver.
I mean, we could do worse. Jarrett Stidham. Next up, fourth round also was Aiden O'Connell, who actually played a ton for a rookie. Ended up starting 10 games for the Raiders after they sent the aforementioned Jimmy G to the bench. 5-5 as a starter, 62% completion percentage, 22-18 in the yardage, 12 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, sacked 24 times. He never looked incredible, but he didn't look terrible either. The Raiders went and added Gardner Minshew. They could still be a player in the draft. How are you feeling about Aiden O'Connell?
This, excuse me, this feels like a Michael Penix landing spot. Feels like Ken the Snake Stabler all over again. You know, a mobile quarterback going into college, gets his knees tore up in college, not mobile anymore, comes out, smart quarterback with a big arm, gets it done. It feels like a Michael Penix landing spot. I don't know that O'Connell just seems more like, pocket protector Gardner Minshew. Like they both have the same skill set, just one of them's kind of a crazy hippie and the other one actually went to class.
There were a ton of rookie quarterbacks last year that actually got into games and made starts. One of them is Clayton Tune, who went in the 5th round to the Arizona Cardinals. Started one game, went 12 of 21, 62 yards, no touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Was sacked 7 times. The Cardinals thought so much of him in year 2 that they went out and traded for Desmond Ridder, who will be behind Kyler Murray. I don't see a reason to keep Tune on my roster.
Yeah, to be honest, we can lump all 4 of these last guys together if you want.
Yeah, so the others, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, who was 1 and 2 as starter. Sean Clifford never actually got in the game, is a backup for Green Bay, and was their only other quarterback behind Jordan Love for a lot of last year. And then Jaron Hall, who did start for Minnesota, and Minnesota fans probably wish he hadn't.
I mean, this is a group of practice squad developmental guys that are probably going to spend most of their first contract with the team that drafted them. They'll, at best, they're the 3rd quarterback on their teams. I get Clifford. Clifford was the 2nd, but I mean, if you watched him play at Penn State, Green Bay is out there looking for a backup quarterback.
Yeah, we shall see. Well, let's transition before we get out of here and talk a little bit about our 2-round mock draft. We went through and made the picks. I had the first 4. We did 4 and 4 chunks. I had the Bears taking Caleb Williams, the Washington Commanders taking Jaden Daniels, the New England Patriots taking Drake May, and the Minnesota Vikings going up to 4 to take J.J. McCarthy. So what do you think the chances are? I think the big questions here, Caleb Williams to the Bears feels like a lock. It feels unlikely to me that Minnesota is going to manage to get up in the top 3, so they're probably looking at McCarthy. What do you think about the Commanders' thought process, and is there any chance that the Patriots actually forego a quarterback and take Marvin Harrison?
I would be really surprised. I just think that, Jared Mayo, he's a first-time head coach. Picking at number 3, I don't know how you can pass on a quarterback there. For me, I think what it comes down to is after Caleb Williams, which team falls in love with which quarterback? And whoever ends up as quarterback number 4, then it starts to jockey around and figure out, if I'm the Cardinals, I mean, Marvin Harrison is arguably the best player in this draft. do I really want to trade down? And if so, how far do I want to trade down? And because you have the Chargers, the Titans, would it surprise you if the Titans are like, look, we've seen enough of Will Levis and they take JJ McCarthy, or if Drake May falls because
I mean, it would surprise me if the Titans made a move at quarterback, because I think with them signing Mason Rudolph and they still have Malik Willis, I think they are going to give Will Levis a shot. I think that's their thought process.
That makes sense. But if they said, hey, I want to get, Callahan's like, I want my own quarterback,
I don't know. I think there's enough quarterback desperation between Minnesota and possibly even the Giants, possibly Denver, possibly the Raiders. That
the Giants are the real wild card there, because we've heard two stories coming out of New York. Daniel Jones is locked. They're locked into Daniel Jones, and he's the guy, and they're locked in, and Daniel Jones is definitely not the guy. And so it's like there's no middle ground where,
I mean, if you're looking at potentially giving Drew Lock a shot to start, why wouldn't you also potentially? I mean, if a quarterback, one of these quarterbacks is there at 6, well, I think they would take a long, hard look. I just feel like somebody is going up to 4 or 5, and you could be right. I could see the Chargers with Harbaugh and the rebuild that they seem to be in the midst of, dropping back and taking their chances at 11 and 23.
Yeah, the Chargers, they want to, they need to rebuild their wide receivers. They could use some offensive linemen.
Secondary.
So there's a good it just comes down to, I think the Chargers right now are casting spells trying to get Arizona to not move, because then they're the player.
Let's take a look. I'll finish out the rest of the top 10. We left the Chargers in place. You took Marvin Harrison Jr. for them. New York Giants at 6 with 4 quarterbacks off the board. Go with Malik Neighbors to get a wide receiver. Tennessee Titans at 7, get a tackle in Joe Alt. The Falcons at 8 with their offense completely rebuilt, take Dallas Turner, get a top edge. Chicago Bears at 9, now no longer a glaring need at wide receiver. I had them taking Jared Verse, getting themselves an edge. With the Jets at 10, and this is interesting, they did take Mike Williams, but they're still looking for weapons. I had the Jets take Brock Bowers, which even with the signing of Williams, I could see that fitting in pretty well, giving them just another passing weapon. But looking at the fantasy relevant, would you like Marvin Harrison with the Chargers, Malik Neighbors with the Giants, Brock Bowers with the Jets? How would you grade those if those were the landing spots for fantasy?
The biggest concern with Harrison to the Chargers is Greg Roman going run heavy. I mean, he doesn't have the backs for it now, but you're not going to draft a back until the 3rd round, probably. And this isn't the deepest running back class. There are some backs that you can get late 2nd, 3rd, 4th round that can hold up and carry the ball a lot. I love Neighbors to New York. They need an alpha receiver. Jalen Hyatt is good. Wan'Dale Robinson's pretty good, but neither one of them are alpha receivers. Darren Waller is, he's got 1 foot out the door. He started the retirement talk. I think he's going to end up splitting time a little bit more with Daniel Bellinger this year. Bowers at 10, the Jets need offense, and Brock Bowers is a difference maker. He creates mismatches. It comes down to Rodgers being able to stay healthy. I'm not terribly threatened by Mike Williams there. I like Mike Williams okay, but he's probably a wide receiver 3-4 at best. With a couple blow-up games for the most part.
Let's look at the next 10 with the Cardinals down at 11 after the trade. They got Rome Odunze at wide receiver. 12, the Broncos. I took Bo Nix, quarterback. You were on with the Raiders at 13. You took Michael Penix. Then the Saints at 14, Olaf Fashanu, the tackle. Colts 15, Terry and Arnold, a cornerback. Seahawks get an edge, and I don't even know how to pronounce that.
I too.
Layout too, yeah. 17, Jacksonville Jaguars. I took Brian Thomas because now that Calvin Ridley's gone, I still think wide receiver is a pretty big need for them. Bengals, Troy Fonatu, giving them another offensive line piece. For the Rams, getting Quinion Mitchell, cornerback, seems to be a pretty big need. And for the Steelers, getting Talisi Fuaga, an offensive tackle, because their offensive line needs a little bit of work. So if this is how it falls, how do you like Odunze with the Cardinals and, Bo Nix, Michael Penix, if that's where they go? Do you think either of them starts? And then we won't forget Brian Thomas potentially with the Jaguars.
I love Odunze to the Cardinals. I think he's going to be successful anywhere. The big concern is that he's kind of similar to Michael Wilson, except for he stays healthy a lot. There's definitely room for Wilson and Odunze. They got Greg Dortch coming back, so they'll still need to build out that wide receiver core a little bit more. I think they'll need a speedster over the top, somebody that
got Chris Moore. So.
Yeah. I just think Odunze is good. I mean, well, I don't think I could bring myself to take him over Harrison, and probably not over Neighbors. I think he's pretty much unquestionably the wide receiver 3 in the class for me. I don't think Bo Nix is a first round pick. I think he'll get drafted in the first round, but I think it's going to be later.
And I think if Denver does it, Jarrett Stidham starts. I actually think with these quarterback positions, Jarrett Stidham and Gardner Minshew would be your week 1 quarterbacks for the Broncos and the Raiders.
If I had to put money on one of them starting, it would be Michael Penix. I don't know, just the offense that Nix ran with that, I think it was something like 35% of his passes were at or behind the line of scrimmage. It was just that bubble screen offense, and I just think he's going to need to.
Did you see Denver's offense last year? It's almost entirely bubble screens and end arounds.
I think Thomas is a great pick. He's kind of moved. I've seen a lot of people move him to the wide receiver 4 position. had a pretty good college career. Biggs, 6'4", 200-pounder. Ran a 4.39 or 4.38. So I like him a lot. He definitely is, like, when I look at fantasy drafts, super flex, you've got Williams, Daniels, May, Harrison, Odunze, Neighbors, and Bowers. That's your top 7. Then it comes to 8. It's probably McCarthy. And right now it's looking like I've got a couple drafts where I'm at the 109, and I'm like, okay, I'm good with Brian Thomas. I think I could go there. Maybe I go Michael Penix if I feel, if the news around him is good, it looks like he's going to start. But
non-super flex drafts are going to be rough.
The wild, wild west.
Let's close out round 1. Dolphins at 21. We had him take Byron Murphy, defensive tackle, kind of shoring up that defense. Eagles at 22, getting Chop Robinson, the edge. Cardinals at 23 after that trade, get their second first round, Darius Robinson, an edge. At 24, we have the Cowboys taking Tyler Guyton. They would definitely need a tackle. Same for Green Bay at 25, taking J.C. Latham, shoring up the offensive line. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, we had them taking Nate Wiggins, a cornerback. Cardinals with their third first-round pick because they already had to, getting Jerzahan Newton, giving them a defensive tackle. So they get a couple of defensive pieces and that wide receiver, kind of building that team out. Bills at 28, getting Adonai Mitchell. And Lions at 29, you get your man, Keon Coleman, a couple wide receivers. Then Ravens getting a tackle in Amarius Mims and a couple of corners to close it out with Kool-Aid McKinstry going to the 49ers and TJ Tampa. It wasn't easy going to the Chiefs. So out of that, we only had a couple more fantasy relevant, and that would be potentially Mitchell to the Bills. The Bills may have signed Curtis Samuel, but it feels like wide receiver still in need. I'm not convinced they're on good terms with Stephon Diggs. I guess we never will be. And then you giving Coleman to the Lions, you mentioned you thought they still needed to add more. So if those were landing spots, how would you feel?
Well, I don't think we should discount the additions of Tyler Guyton and J.C. Latham to those offenses. You got to have your quarterback upright, and both of those teams need to. Josh Jacobs wouldn't mind with David Bakhtiari getting released. They need a stud left tackle.
Well, and those two make sense because the Cowboys, honestly, because we mentioned earlier, they have no money and they've had to do some subtractions. They have a lot of needs actually in skill positions too, but they've got to fix the line first. Yeah.
But so Mitchell, good speed, big receiver, and Stephon Diggs, for as big a stud as he's been for fantasy, had a closing stretch last season that was just abysmal. And I don't know, I don't know if it's just as, he's hit the age cliff and fell off. They need to add a receiver. I don't think that Curtis Samuel is a 1-for-1 replacement for Gabe Davis. And, we can laugh about Gabe Davis's 0, 9, 0, 15, 0, all we want. But Davis was a pretty good receiver. And he got, a $40 million, $50 million deal from Jacksonville. So adding Mitchell makes a ton of sense. I don't think he'll be a guy that you want in your starting lineup week one, but I could see him ascending. I could see him having a Rashee Rice type of year where by the end of the season, you're like, man, I'm glad I drafted this guy. Keon Coleman in Detroit, they need a big receiver. I love Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's dynamic. He's going to get a lot of opportunities. Sam Laporta, fantastic tight end. Jameson Williams can take the top off, but they need a big receiver that Jared Goff can get, mid-range kind of down the field. The big knock on Coleman is that, he doesn't have good separation. He only ran like a 4.62, but he catches it if it's near him. So that you like. And, he did a great job running through the gauntlet drill. He had one of the top speeds in that. So I think his play speed is better than his, time measured speed.
We're running low on time a little bit here, so we'll go through the second round pretty quickly. I'm going to look at the top 16 picks in the second round, and we'll look at the fantasy relevant ones. At 201 for the Panthers, getting Graham Barton, giving them a good player in the middle, continuing to build that line. Xavier Legette, wide receiver, going to the Patriots at 2. Wide receiver certainly still a need. You get that quarterback, you got to throw somewhere. Cardinals up again, getting Cooper DeJean, cornerback, kind of giving them 3 layers of the defense so far, along with the wide receiver. Commanders taking Jackson Powers Johnson, a center, at 205. The Chargers getting Tavondre Sweat, a defensive tackle, to kind of build that line. Titans getting Chris Braswell, an edge, at 6. The Giants getting Jordan Morgan to work on building that offensive line, a tackle. And then at 208, you had the Commanders taking the speedster Xavier Worthy. 209, we had the Packers going with a safety, Javon Bullard. Minnesota Vikings getting defensive tackle Chris Jenkins at 10. At 211, 211, the Falcons getting Karimi Lassiter, another corner. The Raiders at 212 getting Zach Zinter, a guard. The Saints at 213 getting a wide receiver, Ladd McConkey. They could use some receiver help. The Colts at 14 getting Braden Fisk, a defensive tackle. The Giants getting a tackle, offensive tackle in Kingsley Sumatia at pick 15. And then at 216, the Jaguars getting Ricky Pearsall. I don't know if you remembered that I took a wide receiver for them in the first round, but that would potentially give them both Brian Thomas and Ricky Pearsall. So let's look at the fantasy relevant ones. Xavier Legette possibly going to New England Patriots. Worthy going to the Commanders, where currently De'Ami Brown is listed as their wide receiver 3. McConkey to the Saints and Ricky Pearsall to the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Yeah, so I must have missed that, but it is what it is. So the Patriots, they need receivers. They signed KJ Osborne. That was their free agent signing. Juju Smith-Schuster, Kendrick Bourne, and Demario Douglas are their top 3 receivers.
And they also have Jalen Reagor.
Yeah, and Tyquan Thornton and Kayshon Boutte. They need some guys, especially if they're gonna bring in a new quarterback. You want to give him some weapons. Xavier Legette is a 6'1", 225 pounder. He can do a lot of things on the field, has great speed. So I don't hate that at all. I think that the potential is there. We'll have to see how Alex Van Pelt, what he does with the offense. Is he going to be conservative with it, with Ramondre Stevenson, Hunter Henry, and Gibson, or will he open it up a little bit and see if Kendrick Bourne can put together a good year? Xavier Worthy to the Commanders. That was, I get it that Terry McLaurin also ran a 4.39, so it isn't like he's slow. But McLaurin's about 28, 29 years old now. The concern with Worthy is that he ends up being just this one-trick pony. He runs fast, and that's pretty much it. We've seen a lot of these guys that either set the bench press record or set the 40 record, and that's literally the highlight of their NFL career. And we'll have to see if that happens with Worthy. He looks like he's got a little something to his game and will be able to be successful in the NFL. Putting him in there with a new young quarterback, a good mentor in Terry McLaurin. Jahan Dotson, he was inconsistent last year. We expected a bigger step out of him. De'Ami Brown, honestly, overperformed a little bit based on his draft capital and what was expected of him for his career. McConkey is an interesting one. He just seems to have a great all-around skill set, and he feels a little bit like a lightweight, a lightweight Taysom Hill. He can do all of those things that, like, different things. It isn't, he's only a slot guy. He's only a deep threat. He can run an end around. He's got good speed. So pairing him up with Chris Olave and then letting those two guys kind of work that defense together. They're both good route runners, good speed. I think it makes for a very dangerous combination of players down there in New Orleans. Pearsall, that was a stupid pick based on you taking Thomas. But Pearsall was a combine darling. Great speed, excellent route runner, great change of direction. Does a lot of things really, really well. Was just in a low volume passing offense. So he's somebody that he's a guy that you would have that I think you would see a early 2010, somewhere between 2008 and 2016 New England Patriots team draft.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. So let me tick through the rest of our second round. We had the Bengals taking Enos Rakestraw Jr., a corner. The Eagles getting Edrin Cooper, a linebacker. The Steelers getting Peyton Wilson, a linebacker. Arguably the Steelers could use a wide receiver. It just wasn't falling, in this draft flow where it made sense. The Rams getting Tyler Nubin as safety. Eagles getting a corner in Kalen Carson. The Browns getting Zach Frazier, a center. Christian Haynes, a guard, going to Miami Dolphins. Dallas Cowboys taking Trey Benson, the first running back off the board at 224. Tampa Bay getting a safety in Jaden Hicks. Green Bay getting a corner in Max Melton. Houston Texans with their first pick since they traded their first rounder this year, getting a tackle in Patrick Paul. The Bills getting Brandon Dorless, a defensive tackle, to kind of help beef up that line. A guard in Cooper Beebe going to the Detroit Lions. A guard in Christian Mahogany going to the Baltimore Ravens. 49ers taking a defensive tackle in Michael Hall. And you have the Chiefs taking Tez Walker at wide receiver. So let's zero in on the fantasy guys. Trey Benson to Dallas, given the mix they have there. How do you feel about that? And Tez Walker kind of joining. Obviously, Chiefs went and got Marquise Brown, but they can't possibly be done. We expect them to take another receiver.
So it just feels like Jerry Jones is going to say, "Get me a running back here now. I got you. I let you guys pick the left tackle in the first round. Now take a running back." And Trey Benson seems to be the best running back in this group. He's got good size. He's a 3-down back. He can catch the pass. Ran a 4.39 40. The other guy I really like is Jalen Wright, but I do think it's going to be Trey Benson. Excuse me.
You got all choked up about Trey Benson there.
So I'm honestly, it wouldn't surprise me if no running back goes in the first 2 days or the first two rounds.
Yeah.
But even the first 2 days, I think there'll be a couple go in the third round. But it's going to be, I mean, just teams are devaluing running backs. And this running back class isn't a world beater. Tez Walker, on the other hand, he came out, he looked great. He's got a little bit of inconsistency with his hands, but he's got good size, good speed. I hate to say, oh, well, he's the MVS replacement, but because that just tends to portend dropping the ball a lot. And I don't know that Walker will be quite that proficient at dropping the ball. I think Walker's a good wide receiver, and Kansas City getting him here at the end of the second round. You got Rashee Rice going into his second year, who has established himself. He can take another step. Travis Kelce, the career is starting to wind down. He's still very effective, but it's starting to wind down a little bit. I just think that Walker has the potential at the end of next year, the end of next season, for us to kind of look at him like we did Rice. And going into 2025, Kansas City fans hanging their hat on the Rashee Rice, Tez Walker duo at wide receiver.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it goes from there. So that's a look at our 2-round mock draft right now. Still probably just about a month and a week, right? Because it's April 25th, which would be next Monday. So just about getting close into a month away. We'll see how things continue to play out. Dennis and I will be back on Friday looking at the running back group from the class of 2023 and where their fantasy value sits right now. And that should be an interesting discussion. And who knows how many more people are going to get traded between now and then, because it continues to be kind of the Wild West out there, Dennis. But if the people are waiting for that next fix, what can they do?
So what they can do is they can go to scottfishbowl.com and register for the Scott Fish Bowl, fantastic charity fantasy football league. And then outside of that, pop the Fantasy Football Roundtable in your ear. Go to your favorite podcast platform, hit that like and subscribe, leave us a rating and a review. Listen to us. Last week, we charted in Canada and Great Britain.
Look, we're getting all that Queen and Country. Maybe we should start having some royal family updates.
No.
Stick to what you know, I guess. Stick to what you know. Well, that'll do it.
Family's Archie Griffin.
That'll do it for us today. I hope you guys have a wonderful week. Hopefully you're enjoying some nice sunshine like we are here in Colorado. It's almost like after 25 inches over the weekend, what snow? But really happy to be with you guys and look forward to seeing you on Friday. Until then, you guys have a wonderful week.